property developer is threatening to withdraw from Melbourne's property market over a contentious property tax proposal.
What the Victorian government's proposing to do is to increase the worst tax in its armoury.
They've just foisted a new property tax on Victorians, every Victorian.
Imagine you're a young Australian couple. You've been saving for years to buy your first home. You've cut back on everything. No holidays, no fancy dinners, living like monks just to scrape together a deposit. You finally think you're getting close to affording something, and then the government announces a new policy that's supposed to help you get into the housing market. But here's the kicker, mate. This policy is going to make things worse for you, not better. In fact, it's going to completely destroy what's left of housing affordability in Australia. And the most infuriating part? The politicians pushing this policy know it won't work, but they're doing it anyway because it sounds good in the headlines. We're talking about Labor's plan to scrap the 50% capital gains tax discount for property investors. On the surface, it sounds brilliant, right? Stick it to those greedy property investors. Make them pay more tax, and somehow, magically more houses will become available for first home buyers. But the devil is in the details, and those details are absolutely terrifying for anyone trying to get into the housing market. The average Australian home has just passed $1 million for the first time in our history. Sydney's median house price is forecast to hit $1.83 million by June 2026. It now takes half of your median household income just to service a new mortgage. That's well above the 30% that's considered housing stress. And their solution? A tax policy that will make everything worse. Before we dive into this housing disaster, if you want the uncensored truth about Australia's housing policies, the economic analysis and data that mainstream media won't touch, join our Patreon. We're the resistance exposing the policies that are making housing less affordable, not more. Link in the description.
But the second thing is, my memory is, this has been done and it failed.
Right now, if you're a property investor and you hold a property for more than 12 months, you get a 50% discount on your capital gains tax when you sell. So if you buy a property for $500,000 and sell it for $1 million, instead of paying capital gains tax on the full $500,000 profit, you only pay tax on half of that, $250,000. This discount doesn't just apply to property, it applies to all investments, stocks, businesses, startups, you name it. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Labor wants to remove this discount only for property investors while keeping it for every other type of investment. Think about that for a second. They're specifically targeting property investors while protecting wealthy stock market investors. If you're rich enough to have a diversified portfolio of shares and businesses, you keep your tax benefits. But if you're a working class Australian who put your life savings into a rental property, you get slugged with higher taxes. It's economic discrimination, pure and simple. But here's what they don't want you to know. The average property investor has a household income of less than $120,000. These aren't billionaires living in Turek mansions. They're teachers, nurses, tradies trying to build wealth for retirement. 70% of property investors own just one investment property. They're ordinary Australians who've worked their asses off and made sacrifices to invest in their future.
Australians now well into their 30s are struggling still to buy a home.
Here's the part that should absolutely terrify every first home buyer. Only 5% of existing homes sell each year. Out of Australia's 11 million private residential dwellings, only about 550,000 change hands annually. The housing market is already incredibly illiquid, and now they want to make it worse. For expensive properties above $2 million, the turnover rate drops to just 2 to 3% annually. We're talking about a market that's already constipated, and this policy will make it completely blocked up. The research data is absolutely damning. 20% of property investors sell within 1 year, and another 35% sell within 2 years. That means 55% of investors are relatively short-term holders who contribute significantly to market turnover. When this tax hits, those investors will completely change their strategy. Instead of selling after a year or two, they'll hold properties for decades to avoid the tax penalty. That 5% annual turnover could easily drop to 3%, 2%, or even 1%. Fewer properties available means higher prices for first home buyers, not lower ones. Want proof this works? Look at California's Atherton, the richest zip code in America. House prices went up 13%, despite an ordinary economy because their property tax system discourages selling. When you buy a house, your property tax is calculated based on what you paid for it. If you sell and buy an identical house at current market prices, your property tax could double or triple overnight, so nobody sells. They hold properties forever because selling means massive ongoing tax increases, less liquidity, fewer houses available, and prices that keep rising regardless of economic conditions. That's exactly what Australia's about to do to itself.
And too many Australians have been locked into renting forever. Some are moving back into home with their parents, some with their grandparents.
Australia is already facing the worst housing supply crisis in our history, and this policy will make it exponentially worse. The government promised 1.2 million new homes by 2029. We're on track to fall 262,000 homes short. Jim Chalmers has already quietly admitted that Labor's ambitious plan has failed spectacularly. We completed only 177,000 new dwellings in 2024, but we needed 223,000 just to keep up with demand. That's a shortfall of 46,000 homes in just 1 year. And it's getting worse every year. Meanwhile, we're bringing in 470,000 new people every year through immigration, like adding another Perth every 5 years. These people all need somewhere to live, but we're not building enough homes for them. So we've got massive demand from immigration. We're failing catastrophically to build enough new homes. And now they want a policy that makes existing housing supply even less available. It's like being in a drought and deciding to blow up the water tanks because you don't like who owns them. No state or territory is meeting their housing targets. The construction industry is stretched beyond breaking point, with massive skilled worker shortages and supply chain problems. Even if we had unlimited money, we don't have enough tradies to build the homes we need. This policy won't just hurt people trying to buy homes, it'll absolutely devastate the millions of Australians who rent. When you make property investment less attractive through punitive taxation, fewer people become property investors. That means fewer rental properties available for the 40% of Australians who rent their homes.
This will supercharge housing prices, and so in that sense, it will actually make the problem of housing affordability worse.
We already have rental vacancy rates at just 1.8% nationwide, near record lows and well below the 3 to 4% that's considered balanced. Renters are competing fiercely for the few available properties, driving rents through the roof. It now takes 33% of median household income just to cover a new lease. When this policy reduces the number of property investors, the rental pool shrinks even further. With 470,000 new people arriving annually who need somewhere to live, rents will explode upward. We're talking about rental increases that will make the current crisis look like a picnic. Eventually, rents might get so high that property investment becomes attractive again despite the tax penalty. Melbourne might see gross rental yields of 6% or more, Brisbane could hit 5 to 6%, and Sydney might go from its current pathetic 2% yields to 4 or 5%. But those higher yields will only be possible because renters are paying massive rents. Think about a young family renting in Melbourne. Right now, they might be paying $400 a week for a basic 3-bedroom house. When the rental supply shrinks due to this policy, that same house could easily jump to $500 or $600 a week. That's an extra $5,000 to $10,000 a year just for having a roof over their heads. This isn't theoretical economics. We can see exactly how these policies play out by looking at other countries. The evidence is overwhelming, and it's all bad news for housing affordability. In the United Kingdom, when they increased stamp duty for investment properties and reduced tax deductions, property investment fell, rental supply tightened, and rents increased faster than they had in decades. The policy was supposed to help first home buyers, but it ended up hurting renters and making the housing market even more dysfunctional. Germany tried rent controls and investor taxes in cities like Berlin. The result? New rental construction virtually stopped. Existing rental properties were converted to owner-occupied housing, and the rental market became so tight that people were bidding above the advertised rent just to secure a property. They eventually had to reverse many of these policies because they were making the housing crisis worse. Even in New Zealand, when they removed tax deductions for property investors, the immediate result was higher rents and reduced investment in new rental properties. The policy was supposed to cool the housing market, but it just shifted the problem from buyers to renters without actually improving overall affordability. The pattern is consistent across every country that's tried these policies. They reduce property investment, tighten rental markets, increase rents, and often lead to higher house prices due to reduced supply. Yet Australian politicians are charging ahead with the same failed policies. Let's get back to basic economics, because apparently our politicians have forgotten everything they learned in Economics 101. House prices are determined by supply and demand. It's not complicated, but somehow our policymakers have convinced themselves they can ignore these basic principles. Demand is strong and getting stronger. We've got massive immigration bringing in nearly 500,000 new people annually. We've got wealth inequality that means the rich are getting richer and competing for the same premium properties. We've got foreign investment adding to the pressure.
In just 2 years, it brought in 1 million people through the migration program. That is 70% more people coming in through the migration program into our country than at any period in our country's history over that 2-year period. That is quite remarkable.
Supply is weak and getting weaker. We're not building enough new homes to meet demand. We're falling further behind every year. The construction industry is constrained by skilled worker shortages, supply chain problems, and planning systems that take years to approve new developments. And now they want a policy that will reduce the number of existing homes that come onto the market. Strong demand plus weak supply equals higher prices, not lower ones. This isn't rocket science. It's the most basic principle in economics. But politicians are either too stupid to understand this, or they're deliberately misleading voters because the policy sounds good in focus groups. You want real solutions? Build more bloody houses. Reform the planning system so it doesn't take 3 years to get approval for a simple subdivision. Release more government land for development. Invest in infrastructure so we can build housing in areas with good transport links. Fix the skilled worker shortage in construction by targeting immigration toward the trades we desperately need. Encourage modern construction methods like prefabricated homes and modular construction that can cut building times in half. But no, instead of addressing the actual problem, which is supply, they want to implement a policy that will make the supply problem worse while pretending it's going to help first home buyers. It's like having a traffic jam and deciding the solution is to close more lanes because you don't like the people driving in them. The truth is, this policy will achieve the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. House prices will go up, not down. Rents will go up, not down. First home buyers will have fewer options, not more. The only people who will benefit are the politicians who get to look like they're doing something about housing affordability while actually making everything worse. Australia's housing market is already on life support, and this policy is like pulling the plug. When house prices keep rising, when rents become even more unaffordable, when first home buyers are locked out completely, remember who did this to you. Remember the politicians who chose virtue signalling over economic reality. The mainstream media won't tell you the economic truth about these housing policies because they're cheerleading anything that sounds like it's sticking it to investors. But we're not afraid to expose the policies destroying housing affordability for ordinary Australians. Join our Patreon for uncensored economic analysis that reveals what these policies will really do to your chances of owning a home. To see the latest housing crisis update, click this video here.